I love the chaos. I mean, just on a personal level of fulfillment, I love being in this place where there's like so much murky water. You know, when you're starting a business, you have to figure out the HR, you have to figure out the legal, you have to figure out, you know, should I hire this? Is this the way we should go? Things get a little bit like, you know, you're fighting every single day in the trenches to keep your startup alive. I love that. And I think for us, it's also saying, okay, this is a very uncertain time, but in truth, this is a time not to panic. This is a time not to think with the herd, if I could put it that way, but to stop and resurvey the pieces of the board. I like to say that, you know, when you're looking at the world, it's dynamically changing. The terrain is never the same. And so as much as you have this vision of where you want to be, and something like a pandemic comes awash and, you know, sweeps you away, you still realize that the vision is valid because the problem still remains. But the terrain has shifted. So how you're going to get to the top of that summit is going to be different. You know, what fulfills you? What makes you feel like who you are? And that level of achievement should be something that everyone should have, regardless of where you are in life, regardless of your financial situation. That's where we should be.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Mpamunsu, and our goal and mission of the show is to introduce you to stories of young people across the globe who we believe are the next generation of thought leaders, right? This episode's guest is formerly known as the founder and CEO of a startup called Mazi, which I believe is a service company that is ushering the future of e-mobility across the African continent. He's better known as a man who wears a cloak of many colors as he stands out not only as a commendable event host, but also as a green tech pioneer, leading innovative African solutions within the food, water, and energy nexus across the continent. It was only a matter of time that in January 2019, this young man, alongside his co-founder Wuntia Gomda, would win the esteemed 2019 Zayed Sustainability Prize from a competitive pool of 3,000 applicants across the globe. This was just after the duo had designed a machine called the Living Machine, a wastewater treatment system that has the capacity to clean approximately 300,000 liters of water annually. Today, he's now based in Nairobi, Kenya, where he is working on the next leg of his conglomerate, the Mazi Mobility, where he's converting diesel matatus into cheaper electric cars across East Africa. Think of the next Aliko Dangote or our very own Steve Masira. Think Jesse Forrester. Without any further ado, Jesse, thank you so much for joining us here at the Leaders Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mpo. With such an introduction, it's quite hard to follow. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having this platform and for hosting me and for setting up something as, you know, impactful as a leadership podcast.
Thank you so much, Jesse. You know, Jesse, I think, in thinking about the preparation for this podcast, you know, I've really been thinking about the person you've evolved. And a lot of people don't really understand is that you are one of the first few second years who at my time at the academy, I got to actually converse about. And I remember our first conversation was actually about business and leadership on the continent and thinking about the person you've become. You know, I thought that there's no better way than to start really this talk with a message of gratitude towards you for who you've become, staying committed to it. I know that there were times in which the future did not look as bright, but I think I just wanted to thank you for staying committed to the work that you're doing. Right now, Jesse, I know we've got a lot to unpack in the different but I really wanted us to really delve down into your very 2017 TED Talk, in which you speak about purpose, legacy, and millennials. One thing I found so profound in that TED Talk is that you delve into this concept of the Japanese ikigai and link it to purpose. Much more, not only linking it to purpose, but also linking purpose to food. And I was like, there is no way I am starting this episode without asking him to re-explain that analogy.
Thank you so much. First of all, I mean, that conversation was one of the deepest and longest I had with someone I just met. So it's really awesome that we still have that connection.
Yeah.
For the TED Talk, I mean, I've always been obsessed with the whole idea of purpose, why we're here, what does it mean to live out one's greatest form. And I came across Ikigai, and there's just like this different Venn diagrams that center where you're supposed to be. And when I was looking at this, I was saying, I'm such, as you said, I wear many colors, I have many hats, I love to host, I am a businessman, I do archery. So it looked really limiting for me to follow one particular track. And I had all of these passions. So I started looking through it and I realized, actually, you know what? When you're looking at purpose, people always think it's a singular unidirectional thing. Yeah. But in truth, you've got, life like a table of food, right? So some people find something that they love and it's maybe chicken, and I mean, I love chicken, right? And so that's where they stick. And when they go to a restaurant, we've seen this with different people, is they always order chicken. And that's okay, because this could be someone's only, where they see themselves, they're very content with what they want to do, and that's perfectly fine. But I also really, really like pizza. Right. So sometimes when I go to a restaurant, I'm like, oh, I'm having pizza today, or I'm having this today. And it might seem quite simplified, but the truth is that you can have multiple passions and pursue them at the same time. And the whole idea, again, coming back to Ikigai, is that when you're looking at one particular passion at one particular time, you should be fully invested in it. One of my lecturers used to say that you make it your life for that period of time. So if you're doing something for a period of, say, 3 months, and you need to do it really well, you make it your life, you focus on it, you deliver consistently and without fail. And that's what it means when you're living your life to your full extent. And so these different tables of food, you're not eating pizza and chicken at the same time. Right? Okay, you could, but like most likely you're eating pizza by itself.
Yeah.
And so when you're eating pizza, you're focusing on pizza, but that doesn't mean you don't like chicken. And so that's the whole idea of it. I felt like as young people, or as people in the world, you're really boxed into this is how your life should be. Go to primary school, secondary, university, get kids if that's in your career, get a job, retire, and then die. And for me, that just didn't really appeal to me in the way that I thought. And yeah, that's actually how this whole analogy of the table of food in my TEDx talk really came to be in 2017.
Which I really think is profound, because I think while listening to that, I think one theme I got is that perhaps purpose is dynamic, and as you said, in specific seasons of your life, you've got an expression of that theme, of that purpose, which might be different in a different environment, in a different space, which I think is really quite profound, but also enlightening. In the same TED Talk, Jesse, you bring this notion of perspective, in which you justify that argument is finding who's right, and discussion is finding what is right. And in that, you were basically comparing the perspectives from millennials to older generations. And I left myself thinking, what do you think really informs a millennial's perspective in such a time?
I think it's quite interesting since 2017, because the world has gone through so much change. I mean, you and I, speaking about Africa, we saw dictators get toppled while we were in school. It was absolutely crazy. Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe was gone, and we also saw the case of Sudan. And these are guys or demagogues that we thought, oh, they're never leaving, And so this was something that was remarkable. And I think it also shows the undertone of the current generation. We've seen this with Black Lives Matter protests. We've seen, the defacing of statues that stood for slavery. And for me, when you look at a millennial, again, it's just like this umbrella term, but it's quite different for different people. But I think one thing that connects everyone is this thought of having a more equitable world, one where, we focused on the environment, you take care of your neighbor. We've also seen questions about what capitalism looks like and how that's going to be reshaped and reformed in the coming future. That is no longer for profit, but it's for people, right? Yeah. And so we're starting to see these changes, and especially people like you and I, who I think at this very moment, we hold the cards. It might seem like we are tomorrow's leaders. Absolutely not. We are today's leaders. And, this is something I was thinking about when I was preparing for this podcast. I was saying, how soon do we now become the boomers, right? Like, I mean, not to rush anyone, because that's also like a thing with millennials, where we feel like, you have to be somewhere at a certain age, but at the same time, you've got to take this opportunity and you've got to be consistent with what you want to do, because we have this, I think, that cuts across the board, where people want to see change. People want to, destabilize the system, but then the real work begins after that rhetoric, and after that's happened, into building a system. And so that's where I see myself. And that's been my transition since 2017, where I used to think, back in 2017, Mazi was a photography collective, right? We were doing environmental awareness, which is not a bad thing. But I realized to have a lasting impact, I needed to create products and tangible products. And going to the African Leadership Academy, it helped me frame that in a business setting. And I realized, when you have a product offering that attracts, some financial benefit, then you hit the sweet spot of what it means to have social impact and for longer. And so that's where I am. That evolution of thought, where we're saying, look, okay, we get the systems are bad. We've been knowing, if I could put it that way, but what does it look like post haste? And that's where I like to live. That's where my mindset is as we speak.
Which I find so profound, because I think as a millennial, I think I find myself, how often do we really detox some of the stuff that really inform our perspectives? I find that quite interesting. You spoke about building to building or taking actions that actually outlive yours and my meager existence, but also more so speaks about the idea of understanding how to build a body of work, a tangible body of work, that when you're 60, you can look back and look at the body of work that essentially, as you say, will continue to outlive you. In one of the many interviews, Jesse, that you have been done after winning the Zayed Sustainability, in one of them you stated that creation is the closest we come to divinity. And that is exactly what the living machine is about. So I wanted you to talk to me more about, what is it about the specific quote that encapsulated what LM Solutions is about?
That's a very good question. And I do still stand by that quote. Your creation is the closest thing we come to divinity, because there is nothing else as pure as seeing something come from nothing towards being fully fledged product or person. We see that as the birth of life, right? If I could put it that way. And it's the same thing with business. It's whenever you take an action outside yourself, and there's a drive outside yourself to do that. So I think that comes really close to what I would imagine God or the whole concept of divinity looking like. But more specifically, when you talk about LM Solutions and previously the Living Machine project, I think you said in the introduction, Wuntia and I applied for the Zayed Sustainability Prize, and we won $100,000 to build this project. And in our minds at the time, it just seemed absolutely bonkers, Yeah. I tell you, I mean, when we look back at it, during this period of time, it was the college application process, and being at the academy, what that's like, right? You focus purely on where you're going, and for Wuntia and I, it was a completely different ballgame. We went, ham on looking at, okay, what is the solution going to look like? How is it going to work? And doing the application process. It was only after we had won when someone asked me, Jesse, what do you think about? Did you think about failing? And I realized that was never a thought that crossed my mind. I never thought for a moment, what if I don't succeed? And this boils down to what you're asking me about creation, because the Living Machine is a wastewater treatment facility that treats 300,000 liters of water a year at the African Leadership Academy. And it's a fully fledged system that takes buildings off the grid. And LM Solutions is a development of that project, where we formed a company and we're looking at changing the way we look at construction, not only in Africa, but in the Middle East, so that we can create buildings that don't actually pollute the environment, but are net positive. Right now, the Living Machine actually reduces your amount of consumption, but we are working on progress to make it towards a point where you could actually get energy from your Living Machine. whether that's in biogas, whether that's in renewables. And this is where the world is going, from farm to table solutions as well. And so that's what we're looking at when you're saying this is something that seems godlike when you have an idea that swims in your mind and you absolutely think you're crazy until it happens. And I like that quote. I think it was from Dale Carnegie or from Carnegie, who says, everything is impossible until it's done. And this was when they were looking at how do you make steel in a cheap way, right? And so Carnegie was like, no, don't tell me no, show me how you're going to make it. And then they built a bridge. And right now it's crazy to imagine anything built without steel. But back in the day, they had to do a demonstration to prove that this bridge could stand. And that's where we are, and that's where we find ourselves. So this is a point where LM Solutions has the opportunity, to reach into the future and bring it closer than we have ever imagined. I also like to say that we all live in someone's version of reality. I really don't like the one that I am in right now, so I'm going to make my own.
Which I think is quite interesting, Jesse, is that also when I think about it, actually looking back, is that a lot of people don't know is that you'd spend your Sunday mornings. I know you and Wuntia would wake up early, go to breakfast, and you'd walk around across the quad with trays to the LC Diversity, where you guys would actually then do this work. And I remember I'd always tease you on your way there, and little did I know who I was actually talking to. But I'm asking this because I really want to understand and talk to me more about the process to winning the Zayed Sustainability Prize and some of the work that you had to do in preparation to winning that esteemed prize.
I think that's a good question. And, I think for the people who will be listening to this podcast, Mpo is an excellent host. You can hear it, how he flatters me. And I think it's one of those things where, I would also, for Mpo to see me there, he had to be present, right? So he was also there at early hours of the morning, building his own projects and his own ideas. Well, that being said, the process of applying for the Zayed Sustainability Prize was more of a matter of chance, as many things are. When Steve Jobs said you can connect the dots only by looking backwards, I don't know if I've butchered that quote, but it's never been realer to me because, when I'm looking back, it all seems like a huge gamble. We moved from the point of view where we found the application given to us by a teacher, and, we said, this is something cool, this is something I want to apply for. And the Living Machine is actually, it's a system that exists already, but we looked at a way, how could we make it more innovative and fitting our context? And so figuring out what we were going to build was the first thing. Secondly was figuring out how it works. So we liked this thing. We were like, okay, this is good. But we needed to understand how it works. And so we would meet at one of the LC classrooms and we'd, draw this on a whiteboard and try and say, okay, this is what this does. And then we'd actually divide questions amongst ourselves and go and think about it. And you're right, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the shadows or behind the scenes where we would meet in my room after check-in. For those who don't know that, you had to be in your dorms by about, I think, 10. And so we would have check-in with our residential assistants, and then we would meet from 10:30 to midnight, kind of every day from March of 2018 all the way till July of 2018. And then after that, we'd also meet on Sundays, right, and Saturdays. And then when we were at home, because I live in Kenya and Wuntia lives in Ghana with a 3-hour time difference, we would actually work remotely. So, when COVID-19 came, we were really prepared because we have this workflow. And I would, work because at the time, I didn't have Wi-Fi at my house. So I would go to a cafe and work until about midnight. They would always kick me out. And you do these things where you buy 1 cup of coffee and you sit there. So this is kind of the battle stories we had. Wuntia would do the same thing. So I'd sleep at midnight, he'd pick up the slack at 9 p.m. his time and follow through until midnight or 1 or whatever time we sleep, until we finally got to the point. And I think the journey itself was really telling because you asked me about application. We went to consult an engineer, and he said, your idea is too small. I don't think it's gonna work, etc. Like he literally dismissed me. I came up with some designs in Google SketchUp, and he was like, I think a middle schooler could do better. And I was like, hey, like I'm really trying over here. Like I absolutely don't know. And it's one of these things when you're in the journey, where if you listen to opinions, you really have to decide what you want to do and what makes sense for you. Because many times people are going to be screaming in the opposite direction of telling you, hey, don't do this. My mom was also saying, oh, you got college. I mean, Jesse, come on. You've got college.
Yeah.
It was insane. I really had to push back against a lot of backlash, and so did Wuntia. And then obviously the whole construction issue was another thing where we had to work remotely again. We just graduated, and managing a construction that was supposed to take 2 weeks unrealistically, but took 6 months. It was absolutely insane. But it's been quite a journey. I mean, looking back, but it's made me more aware of who I am and more convicted. I used to tell Wuntia, and to summarize, that it had to happen. The living machine had to happen. It had to prove that I was not crazy. Right? Because many times along the journey, I used to think, what on earth am I doing? Am I like, what is happening? But when it came to be, as you're saying, it's like, this is a manifestation of all those late nights, of all that consistent work. It was beautiful to see.
I'm also quite interested, Jesse, in some of the intrinsic things, like really thinking about when you are getting all this backlash, right? What was it in specific, if you can articulate it? What was it that really kept you going? Or was it the idea of seeing it into fruition? Or was it something else? Were there certain support structures or internal scaffolding at the academy that really helped you keep the momentum?
I think, well, I'll divide this into two phases. So one was the pre-application, one was the post-application and winning, and the construction. So in the pre-application, obviously, we had the teacher that brought it up to us and Mr. Hans. And so it was really interesting to have those two there, but it was really hands-off. And actually, in the early stages, Mr. Hans Sauder didn't actually believe that it was going to work out the way it was going to work. He thought that we would just do a solar panel on the container classroom. And that was it. That was the way we'd use 100K. And Wuntia and I were just like, you know what? We're actually going for this. So the first period was really much self-motivated, if I'm going to be honest, because we never let anyone know we were actually applying. And we were saying, we just got to go for this, except maybe our families, because my mom seeing me come home every night at midnight, wondering, are you really working on what you say you're working on? There's something else that's going on, African time.
Yeah.
But I think now post-construction, we had a lot of support. I mean, when we were away and we were working remotely, we had Mr. Hans Sauder, who was managing the project. We had, Unati, who was also, working with contractors. We had, a lot of people from the academy side who actually even advanced the funds before the Zayed prize money actually hit the account. So there was a lot that was going on, and we were all rushing as one very large but very remote team to achieve this vision that Wuntia and I had concocted, in the depths of the night. So, I mean, more dramatic. I'm sounding more dramatic than it actually was, but it was very interesting to see. So there was a lot of support. But this is something I've also come to see with my other ventures, is that the beginning stage where you need the most support is where it doesn't actually happen. When you have a glimmer of success is when that comes in. And so I see that as odd, because you want to support someone when they actually need it the most. But people like to associate with success, and that's fine. But it's also, for me, has been a learning experience in terms of saying, you've got to really, really trust who you are. And if you don't trust who you are, you've got to get maybe someone who can reinforce that belief. I really think that I could not have done this without Wuntia. I mean, we're talking about internal support structures. He has been, a pillar for me. And I would like to think I've been to him likewise. And it's one of these things where you have this like dynamic duo, this trio of people, and you're pushing. You're in the trenches. I like to say you're in the trenches. You're fighting every single day so that your vision comes to become reality. And that is where I feel the most alive.
Yeah, and I guess also like brings a lot of fulfillment once it's brought into fruition. And I think really kind of builds a certain amount of confidence that nobody can buy. Right, because you're like, how the heck did I do that? You know what I mean? Which I think is quite commendable, Jesse. And I think the work that you've done has really inspired a lot of students at the academy. Going forward to figure out how do you model that type of thinking that you did in a space like ALA? Like, how do you leave ALA and about impact the space? What does it mean to walk into a space and impact in a manner that is authentically aligned with you, but also really benefits the community? And then I know it's something you did. Now, Jesse, you run a startup. In fact, a conglomerate, let me call it that, because it's kind of like a holdings company called Mazi, which essentially seeks to pioneer and advance the green tech revolution on the African energy market. Kindly unpack what Mazi is, and how will you go about bringing Mazi's mission into fruition?
That's a very good question, Paul. I like to say that, when you look at Mazi or the vision, and you mentioned this earlier, that, I like to play within the food, water, energy nexus. That's really where I see myself. Sorry, there's a lot of air traffic passing over. So the food, water, energy nexus is where I really see myself. When you look at LM Solutions, you see a water-based solution that also provides food, right? And so Mazi is the energy arm. And this is actually what, the World Bank and all of these guys, who probably have done more research than I have, say is a key element for development in any place. And this really goes down for me into a question of, what do I see the world looking like? And what is my vision for what the continent is going to look like in particular? And I look at us and I say, we're in a period of upheaval. We're in a period where, we are industrializing and people not really realizing that as clearly. We are moving from agrarian-based economies towards a more mechanized system. People are saying manufacturing is going to shift to Africa. The cost of manufacturing is rising in Asia. We're seeing, the next developments are going to come from Africa, and we are well positioned. And I looked at it and I said, how can we make the most impact? And I realized there's an infrastructure question. And I did research when I was at the academy. Yeah. And my research paper states that Africa needs to spend $90 billion for the next 10 years, year on year, to achieve its infrastructure needs. And that's with the current population. As you know, population is rising exponentially. Despite COVID-19, the continent has been the least adversely affected. Young people like you and me are the template of what the world is going to look like 2030, 2035, 2050. Black, young, and actually, to be honest, women, right? Yeah. That is the type of person that's going to happen. And so bringing this back to Mazi and looking at the energy point, one thing I realized is that transportation is a very key sector of the economy. And more than transportation, mobility, because mobility takes it a step further. It's not just transportation of goods and people, but it's how they interplay with the overall, sort of like economic sector. Because I see this being like, we cannot start from a position where we're saying, we're going to take up coal mines and we're going to do this. We have the opportunity to harness the fourth industrial revolution. And so Mazi seeks to advance the future of mobility in Africa. And right now we are looking at particular 14-seaters, which are called matatus, otherwise known as minivans. And we're converting them to being fully electric, right? That's the first buy-in step, because they transport 70% of people in Nairobi, and actually majority of people in Africa. In South Africa, you call them taxis. Yeah. In Ghana, they're called trotros. I forget the name in Nigeria, but I was told that recently. And that's where we want to play. But beyond that, we have bigger and a more like grand ambition to capture the overall mobility space.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity to implement, data there. There's an opportunity to implement artificial intelligence. There's an opportunity to learn and leapfrog all these other economies that are so far ahead of us right now.
Yeah.
And so remember what I said, it all comes back down to, where do I see the future? And whose version of reality do I want to live in? And there's been a huge discussion about, Western founders getting more cash, venture capital versus Black founders, especially in Kenya. It's a heated debate. And we realize this because when you look at the energy sector from a Western man's point of view, or Westerners' point of view, you're building off-grid systems. Yes, they're necessary, but they don't really capture the overall trajectory that the continent is looking at, that me and you can see. Because for us, we have a different type of buy-in. We have a different type of stake that is, the scales are different.
Yeah.
And if we want to achieve that vision of a prosperous continent, we have to move beyond just grasping for low-hanging fruit. So we have a grand ambition to ensure that Africa is electrified and that it is, moving with clean energy and is at the forefront of pioneering mobility solutions for the developing world. And I think this is going to happen. And in time for the population density to rise, right? So we want to capitalize on that and say, by the time it's 2035, you don't really realize there's a gridlock because Mazi mobility was right there. We implemented solutions right before that happened. And so we get to 4.4 billion in 2100, and there's a change actually, So that's really what Mazi's mission is, and that's actually how we're trying to achieve it. Our prototype comes out in October, and it's been a journey, I'm telling you.
That's
it's
exciting.
Been a journey.
And I think while I'm listening to you is this idea of envisioning a certain reality. Right, Miles Monroe describes it as vision is the past, is the ability to see beyond what your carnal eye can see. Right, exactly. and really thinking about you, it's like you've got this. Well, from your outspoken answer, thinking about got this clear understanding, of what you would like to. Might not be as detailed or whatever, but there's a certain reality that you see, and I think putting whatever it is to get into that. Generally interested in that too, Jesse. In terms of your personal commitment to this reality, I'm interested in understanding. How did you go about actually coming into figuring out that this is the reality I see? Like, what were some of the things that personally yourself influenced you to be like, this is the reality I see, and I'm gonna taste it?
I think I forget the person that said that if you want to predict the future, you've got to build it. And I've always been interested in transport, and I think as a young person, because as I said, there's so many passions that people have and so many things you could go into. I just looked back and I said, what is it that I actually really liked as a kid? And I was one of those really nerdy children that I still watch Nigel Wild. I mean, I still had a great childhood, but I was also always interested in transport, and I was always interested in food. In the African Institute Academy, I had a farm, I had a greenhouse, etc. And so for me, how I see it is I look at things, markers, I like to call them, and I see opportunity. So looking at the transport industry, for example, you see that it is untouched. Over the period of time since colonization all the way to independence, we've not really seen a big change in how the transport system actually works. And I realized, this is a challenge I want to solve. Then when we're looking at food, when you're looking at food, you've got, this is Africa. Recently I was told that I'm being very authentic because I had chickens in my background. This is definitely how it is on the continent. with my hint of sarcasm there. But in truth, I look at those markers and I say, how is this going to impact people long term? I look at issues like food insecurity and I say, why should we actually have this problem or this challenge? I look at water and sanitation, and they say that for every dollar invested in water and sanitation, you get about $30 back. And I say, this is an opportunity people can solve. And my thought process, if I can walk you through it, was everyone usually says the government is going to take care of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, how long are we going to wait for inefficient systems to take place? And then you see how it was coming out, but I didn't have the tools to build what I wanted. I didn't have the tools to take a challenge that everybody talks about and make it into something that I can package in a way that people want to buy and improve their lives in the process. And so that's been my journey. And when you ask me, you know, what are these like things that you look into and how do you like build this future? For me, it's like, for us, we're at the very, very bottom of that pyramid, you know. But I also see us not just building or striving to go a leg up. I see us moving from bottom of the pyramid with a rocket propelling us straight to the very, very top. We have an opportunity here to completely, you know, redefine what it means in business and industry.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years, right? Like, just because you have access to opportunity, you have access to water, energy, and food, who knows who could be that person that propels us to that next level? And because you're using this type of 4.0 industry, you know, that's actually what I look at.
Yeah. Which I think is very profound and must say quite enlightening. Like I was just thinking while you're answering, it's like the moment I rewatch this episode, this is the part I'm going to rewatch and take it for myself. Quite insightful though, Jesse. I think so profound and well unpacked and well articulated. Now, Jesse, we're all experiencing a global pandemic. And I'm really interested with your startup with Mazi. What are some of the challenges that you are facing amidst the global pandemic and the advancement of the fourth industrial revolution? And how are you handling the imbalances during such uncertain times?
Yeah, so I think there's a really interesting book I recently read called Black Swans. I forget the author. And he also wrote the book Anti-Fragility. So he's a really great author. I forget his name, but you know, he talks about being prepared for the worst and in terms of uncertainty. So a black swan event is like a pandemic. It's like, you know, a world war. How do you position your business to survive? And I think, you know, fortunately for Mazi, we are very young. We have a prototype coming out in October, but you know, at the same time, you see supply chains being fragmented. You see people saying, you know, we're not fundraising as much, and you see, oh, you know, this is the challenge. And I think for us, it's also saying, okay, this is a very uncertain time, but in truth, this is a time not to panic. This is a time not to think with the herd, if I could put it that way, but to stop and resurvey the pieces on the board. I like to say that, you know, when you're looking at the world, it's dynamically changing. The terrain is never the same. And so as much as you have this vision of where you want to be, and something like a pandemic comes awash and, you know, sweeps you away, you still realize that the vision is valid because the problem still remains. But the terrain has shifted. So how you're going to get to the top of that summit is going to be different. Before there might have been a plane, but right now it's a gravel-filled, you know, incline. So how do you navigate that? And for me, it's you know, going back to the customers, understanding what they want, positioning my business to be ready, to be mobile, to be quite adaptive and flexible. And it also goes down back to my own view of things. You know, I like to say that I practice stoicism, you know, which I absolutely, you know, if you listen to this podcast, you should look into it. You know, I was listening to some of your previous guests that you had, and the first guy, I think, Ikayang, I don't want to mispronounce his name. He was talking about, he has this, Ikayang, yes. He has this particular relationship with death as a motivator. You know, it sounds so crazy, but I have the same thing. It's a memento mori, meditate on immortality, right? Memento mori, and amor fati, you know, which is Latin for love your fates. And so for me, it's also like, in business, if you apply those principles, you realize that it is very possible that you could have your industry right now, and over a period of time, it could be completely changed. Think about airlines. Okay. So how do you become anti-fragile? You see, connect stoicism, connect anti-fragility to prepare for a black swan, so that you are not hit by uncertainty in the same way other people are. Because uncertainty does not mean that, oh, I'm scared. Oh, it is an opportunity to say the pieces on the board are changing. How do I move with the times? And this is by looking at death as such an extreme example. You look at the worst case scenario, and if you're prepared for that, then you realize everything else becomes chopped liver. Because if you know that the worst outcome is there and you're ready for that, when something as uncertainty comes your way, your mindset is framed to take advantage of the opportunity. There's always this quote that crisis makes crisis makes the best politics, or something like that, right? Like never waste a good crisis in politics, right? It sounds a bit like a Machiavellian, but in truth, as a business person, you have to take advantage of the shifting times, because for a young startup, you don't have as much to lose. You can easily maneuver yourself towards being in a very competitive position, because it is a shifting of the players. And if so that's how I look at it.
Talking about challenges and then what's going on in the pandemic, and like how you're responding to the pandemic, I'm also quite interested in, throughout your journey, what were some of your greatest lessons that you feel like have really contributed have been integral to the Jesse that you are today?
Through the pandemic, what have been my lessons?
Yes, so I was linking it back to what you're going through right now, but also on a larger scale, from a bird's eye view. When you look at your journey prior to starting with the Living Machine and LM Solutions, what have been some of your greatest lessons, from where you started and where you are right now, that have really contributed to who you
are? One, it's going to sound super cliche, but you've really just got to put in the work. I've never been that person that sits down for a long period of time, but that is absolutely essential. You cannot substitute work in whatever you're doing. Two, you must remain resilient in the face of crisis. And so stoicism, for me, helps frame me. It helps ground me in an unsettling time, because I'm able to understand and say, let's step away, right? Everything looks much bigger up close, but if you actually removed yourself, you see it's not really as it seems. It could be something small, but you look at it too up close. Three is thinking. There's this book I love called Thinking Fast and Slow, right? It talks about psychology. And you've heard of it. It's an amazing book. It talks about the father of behavioral economics, and he says there are two types of thinking, and so there's the fast brain that makes really quick assumptions, and we can actually do an example of this right now. Is Mpo, how many animals did Moses put on the ark? How many types of animals did Moses put on the ark?
I don't know. Should I take a wild guess?
So what he put, were they, like the types of animals that were on the ark? It was a male and a female, right? It was two animals, right?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Right? It was two.
Yes.
But Moses didn't put any animals on the ark. It was Noah that did.
Okay.
That's an example of your fast brain in action, right? Because you connect Noah, you connect Moses, biblical figures, and your brain doesn't stop to think. But if I ask you what's 34 times 67, you have to pause. You can't just blurt out an answer, and you have to think about that, and that's your slow brain in action. So that for me goes in. Willpower is finite, and cognitive ability too. So there's only so many times that you can make good decisions, and then after some time you get a bit lazy, you get a bit tired, and you start making bad decisions, right? So that's one thing I've learned with thinking fast and slow. So you have to prime yourself for things you can think fast about and things you can think slow about. But Jeff Bezos says, I'm paid for the small, high quality decisions I make over this, the large, very quote unquote meaningless decisions I have to make.
Yeah.
Because his decisions determine the direction of the business. So that's another thing I've learned in terms of looking through my journey. 4 is create habits now that your future self will thank you for. Leave yourself some nuggets that when you are 25, you look back and say, thank you for 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a small way I do this is sometimes I put some money in different pockets, for example. You just keep that. And then when you wear the shirt and you're like, oh man, I've just found like $10, it's amazing because you didn't expect it to be there.
Yeah.
And so on a much larger abstraction, we can say, you put in the work right now where, you sacrifice, you build, you make deep, meaningful friendships, you get people that push you towards where you want to be. And when you're a few years later on, those relationships pay off. Those investments in your time pay off. So you've got to be very deliberate with every step you make.
Yeah.
So I think those are my 4 sort of lessons I would like to share.
Yeah.
Is that for me, it's just been consistency. That's been my biggest challenge, and I think many people can relate with that. Just being consistent when you don't feel like it. And I think that's actually what I've learned. Is I'm taking a bird's eye point of view.
Yeah. Talking about who you are and what what you essentially about. I'm also interested because it's something I personally also grapple with. When somebody asked me this question, I thought while your answer was like, perhaps this is something that also I'd like to hear from your side. And it was, what is it specifically about entrepreneurship that brings a sense of fulfillment and purpose to your life? Do you know what that is? Do you have an idea of what is it about the space that really makes you feel alive?
I love the chaos. Entrepreneurship is tough. I think it's probably one of the toughest things I've done in my very short life. Just on a personal level of fulfillment, I love being in this place where there's like so much murky water. When you're starting a business, you have to figure out the HR, you have to figure out the legal, you have to figure out, should I hire this? Is this the way we should go? Things get a little bit like, you're fighting every single day in the trenches to keep your startup alive. I love that.
Yeah.
But on a more, less emotional standpoint, there's that quote that I said, and I said, perhaps the most noble thing is to build a future we may never see for people we may never meet, to live a better life than we have ever lived. Our actions must outlast us. And so I looked at the world, and again, this comes back down to, where can I make the most impact? Where can I be most felt in these challenges we face on a daily basis? Because I am tired of hearing, oh my goodness, there's no energy, there's no this, right?
Yeah.
And I said, this is not going to work with me joining a government.
Yeah.
That's really not my thing.
Yeah.
Where can I actually deliver change in a tangible manner? Change I can see. Because I'm a very visual person. And for me, that was entrepreneurship. That coupled with the chaos was my personality. I love to be dynamic. Again, I don't see myself sitting somewhere with a tie, working away at the laptop. No, I could do that for a period of time. But I also love the flexibility entrepreneurship gives you, that sometimes you're not plane flying business class to a meeting with investors, and at the same time you're wearing shorts. You're somewhere, if you're a farmer and you're actually looking in the field, right? That disparate reality keeps you aware of what's happening. And for me, that about entrepreneurship makes me just absolutely adore it. Plus, you also make a good profit along the way, which is an important thing to consider.
And a lot of impact, I guess, making impact, but also becoming a person of note. In the same words that you said in that specific quote, it's something that I had really been thinking about, and some of the words that I actually use whenever I'm interviewed, and I always quote you for these lines, because I really found it so profound, but also left myself thinking. From that quote, what would you say are some of the actionable steps or what is an example of someone who take an action that will outlive yours and my meager existence? What does that essentially look like?
So I think, again, one of the tenets I take from the Stoic philosophy is that you and I are but specks in a very, very small part of the universe, in a very tiny rock that is, hurtling across a sun, that is within a galaxy, that is within a universe, that is within, like, if you keep abstracting, you realize how small and minuscule you are, and your actions. And when you do that, it takes ego away. It's not just about me. And so when we're looking at how our actions can outlast us, it becomes more than Mpo working on the Leaders podcast. It becomes more than Jesse working on Mazi. It becomes a question of, if I cannot impact the universe around me, can I impact my fellow man and woman? And how can I build something that continues to yield dividends, if I could use a business term, for years to come? One that doesn't particularly benefit me in essence, but is something that people can draw from for decades. Again, I see that obviously the world is very much in flux. So some of the things we develop right now may not be relevant, but what could you have done by choosing? And I used to say this, that I believe we can achieve immortality, and not in the traditional way that we think about it, but in the way of every time you create an action, and the action is a drive, so much so that it causes another person to take on another action, then because you have set those chain of events, even though you die physically, your second death, which many ancient cultures believed in, is protracted until your action no longer takes place. And so it becomes not about Mpo who did this action. It becomes about the action itself inherently. What did you do that is rippling throughout society? If you look at people like Alexander the Great or Romulus, that led to the Western civilization becoming real. If the Sicilians won the war, perhaps we would not be speaking English right now. It is those little things that we do, the actions that we take beyond ourselves. And so the quote centers itself on action. Not me. It's not Jesse. It's not Wimpo. It's our actions, and through those actions, we achieve a state of immortality because we have impacted, albeit positively, impacted the people around us. Because when I develop the electric vehicle mobility solution through Mazi, or the food and water solutions through LM Solutions, then what you have is people no longer having to die from pollution. That action is felt, right? And people looking at me, for example, and saying, "Oh wow, this guy is pretty average and did something extraordinary," is amazing.
Which I think is quite interesting, Jesse. And I think the kind of also figures out while you're talking is that the importance of looking within to define that which is external, right? Is that you're really not going to be a thought leader and someone who's really going to escape the culture space if you're not going to look within. I think a lot of people, we often look outward to try and figure out who we should become. I think is quite interesting. And on a bit of a lighter note, Jesse,
before we get down,
okay.
I also think, I'm sorry to cut you short. I don't refer to myself as a thought leader. I feel like for me that seems a bit pretentious to say that I influence thought. No, for me the idea has never been to particularly, because when you say thought leader, people look to you to think about thoughts, and when I look at myself, I like to, like a maverick, or because the world is an echo chamber, right? Like we see things and we take them for what they are, but that's not how it should be. And so I wouldn't want someone to look at me and say, "Oh, maybe if they could draw inspiration, indeed." But a thought leader, I am, as I said, I am this guy who's just doing things.
Yeah.
Because if you looked at me back in the day, you'd not have said, "Oh, this guy's gonna change stuff."
Yeah.
You know, I'm not good at school. I'm average, pretty much at school. And even at ALA, I was on the wait list.
Wow.
I wasn't directly chosen, right? So for me, it's not about what people see, because people see the present.
Yeah.
For me, it's more about what does it look like when you're making that gamble for the long, when you're playing the long game.
Yeah.
You know, what strategy and tactics are you taking?
Yeah.
And if that develops when people call you a thought leader, so be it.
Yeah.
But I don't term myself as that.
Okay.
I felt like there was a need to make that distinction.
Okay. I guess then it kind of, I would rather than encapsulate as someone who's really playing an infinite game and understanding some of the things of I'm not here to play a finite game, but positioning myself, as you said, playing the long game in an infinite game that will essentially outlive me. On a bit of a lighter note though, Jesse, what would you say? Who is Jesse outside of all the titles, the achievements? What do you do to give yourself a human experience or relax? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think based off the discussion we've just had, it seems that I just live in this world of business. I'm very much a real 21-year-old person. I'd like to make that distinction here. I enjoy things. I love photography. That's something I really enjoy. I said I'm an archer. That's something I really want to get back into. I love hiking. That's really cool. I also read a lot. And one thing I do to unwind, I watch a ton of movies. I really like movies. I cook, on the side. So I've got these different things as well that I do because, again, in medio stat virtus. It means virtue stands in the middle. And for me, that's what it means. Yeah, virtue must stand in the middle. So excesses, I try to avoid, even in my my ordinary life. Yeah. So as I go along, I recently saw something on Instagram. I saw these guys who went free diving, and I was like, oh, that's something I have to experience. It looks dope. Yeah. So I'm very much an ordinary 21-year-old person.
Quite commendable indeed. But talking about who Jesse is, what would you say is your message to the world?
Well, I was thinking about this a lot, actually, today. What can I encapsulate me towards people? And I think I really just want to portray to people that, look, truth be told, truth be told, yeah, we're going to cut that out. Truth be told, life is short as it is, okay? There is no need to live in this version that someone has created for you. You want to do some things. You want to get out there. You want to do what you need to do. I say, you know what? Do it. And when you look at the risk factor involved, what does that look like? Does that mean that you have to plan for 3 months if you want to quit your job and save up? What does it look like so that you can actually achieve what you want to do if currently it's not really possible for you to achieve that? So my message to the world is, look, life is short as it is, clearly. Don't spend your life living a life that other people want you to live. Live a life that you can impact other people with. Don't live it because of them, live it for them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You can continue. You want to unpack it?
No. I think that does encapsulate it. That, yeah. I mean, what gives you fulfillment? Because that's been the message of today's discussion with you. Like you asked, what fulfills you? What makes you feel like who you are?
Yeah.
And that level of achievement should be something that everyone should have, regardless of where you are in life, regardless of your financial situation. That's where we should be. So, yes.
Quite important indeed. On that note, how can our listeners and our viewers stay in touch with the work that you're doing? Your social media handles, what are they?
So my personal social media on LinkedIn, I'm Jesse Forrester. Drop me a line. Instagram, Jesse_Forrester. I've got a Twitter too, although it's not that active, but feel free to follow me there. Jesse Forrester _. I tried joining TikTok. I think that's a bit of a challenge. I'm not quite the TikTok dancer. But you can also follow Mazi Mobility on Instagram and Mazi Mobility on Twitter. We've also got www.mazimobility.com. And for LM Solutions, you can check out LM Solutions on LinkedIn. And we're currently developing our social media pages. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Jesse. I think I was genuinely excited for this episode, given, as I've said, how we've evolved over time. And I think it's quite an interesting space to see what one can do in a short space of time if they commit to themselves to that reality that you said. And I think you really realize what you can potentially do in such a short space of time if you really commit yourself. And I think, like, while I was also thinking about you is also like, kind of you realize, have I really been downplaying myself for this long? Once you have the sudden realization of what you can do. And also, like, you figure out going forward, you really put aggressive deadlines that really push you and really help you become a better person. I really hope that everybody who's listening to this episode find this valuable. Thank you so much, Jesse.
It's a pleasure, Mpo. Thank you for hosting me. As you mentioned, it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us, right? That quote is relevant. You're scared of who you could be. As you said, you could be more than you've ever imagined. And the thought of that is scary. But feel the fear and do it anyway.
Thank you so much, Jesse. All right, there you have it from Jesse Forrester herself. Guys, go read and look about Jesse on his social media pages as he shared. We'll also share some of his details on our personal social media at the Leaders Podcast. Once again here, we believe that as more and more young people go conscious of their unique purpose, as they discover their hidden pearl, they essentially add value to society in the only way they can. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Apple Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, comment, and share with at least 3 people who you believe will find this episode quite valuable. It's been an honor hosting you to our audience. Until next time, asante sana.